Amazing. Okay, well, we are live. Thank you so much, Mansour Ashkar, for joining us today. A real hero, I think, of freedom and of standing for values that everyone here in the West stands for: the sanctity of life, the appreciation for diversity, the need for peaceful communication and love for one another. So let's start off by just hearing about you. You, Mansour, are an Arab Israeli. That, for many of our followers, might sound like an oxymoron. Let's hear directly from you. Who you are, what your childhood was like. Tell us all about you.
Wow. So yeah, you got it right. I'm an Arab Israeli. I'm a Druze. Israel is a nation for many, many diverse nationalities. It's a Jewish state, but it's a state that gives equal rights and opportunity for every religion that is living under the flag of Israel. That includes the Druze, that includes the Muslims, that includes the Christians. There's a small Alawite community, Cherkess. There's a lot of very, very small Mormons and etc. There's quite a lot of colorful, picture of the people in Israel. I grew up as a Druze in a Druze village of Sfia and Wow. I came from a very Zionist, patriotic family. My grandfather was one of the first Druze soldiers and officers in the IDF. And he was later on the highest ranking Druze officer in the IDF. He opened the way, he paved the way for many, many Druze to follow after. And he was even awarded the honor to light the Masu'ah. That's the beacon that we light in the Independence Day. He was the first non-Jewish citizen of Israel to light that Masu'ah. And I grew up in this kind of patriotic Israeli mentality. My mom was named Medina, which is after the name of, the Medina, the state of Israel, basically. I spent my childhood in the village, but then at an early stage, we decided to move to a Jewish city of Eilat, which was back then we were one of the first Druze ever to leave the village, because the Druze is a very small, secretive community, and it was very uncommon for Druze people to leave and go with a wife, with the family, with the children outside of the village and live among the Jews. And we were among the first ones to do that, which made life very interesting because many. Yeah.
So Mansour, I want to get to that. I want to hear what it's like for a Druze child to leave the Druze community, the comfort of familiarity and community and the same religion, and to be able to go and integrate into Israeli society with a Jewish culture and mostly majority Jewish population. I want to hear about how you were received there and if you felt different, if you felt ostracized, if you felt oppressed at all. But I want to get back to a few things that you said, which you say it just because it's your life as something that's, as we say in Hebrew, muvan me'elav, a given. But so many things that you just said are groundbreaking, that your grandfather served in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, as a Druze, that he was able to light he received the highest honor of Israel, that he was able to light the flame on Independence Day, where only the people who Israel recognizes have contributed more than anyone else in society, have the honor of lighting that. And it was your grandfather. And also, going back to the fact that what you called is a small secretive community. That's how you described the Druze community. So let's start off with just explaining who are the Druze. I know that they come from the tradition of Yitro, of Jethro, from the scriptures, that you, Mansour, come directly from the lineage of Jethro from the Bible. And I don't know much else. So tell me more about what it means to be a Druze.
All right. So I will recommend to go and watch the Disney movie about Egypt. I forgot the name of that movie. It had a very cool soundtrack.
From Egypt.
From Egypt, exactly. And then you'll know who Jethro is. So Jethro was the father-in-law of Moses. He was the father of Zipporah. And he met Moses as a young man running in the desert after he was, fleeing the palace of Pharaoh. And he really liked that young man, and he welcomed him to his tribe, and he started teaching him, a little bit about, politics and leadership. And he saw great potential in Moses, And he made him basically a shepherd and one of the leaders in his tribe. And later on, he loved him so much that he allowed him to marry his daughter Tzipporah. Back then, you needed to ask the permission of the father, and the blessing, was a old school traditions. And through that, the Druze see themselves as direct descendants of Jethro, the lineage of Jethro, and that's why they saw themselves very connected with Christians and Jews. Later on, when you see there's no hostility between the Druze and the Jews and the Christians. Actually, there's a lot of love and respect. If you walk into a Druze village, it doesn't matter if it's in Israel, in Lebanon, in Syria, and you tell them that you're Christian or you're Jew, they would love it. People will walk from all over the village to come and hear about your faith. Tell us how you pray. Tell us what kind of food, what traditions you have. What's the role of a father and a mother in that society? Everything. So we're very, very fascinated by different religions, and specifically about the Jews and the Druze. Now, the Druze, they see themselves theologically, we're talking right now, as a very secret minority that lived under the radar throughout these, thousands of years. And here and there, they had glimpses where they came to the front stage. Yeah. One of the greatest example of that is when they came down to the Caliphate in Egypt under the Muslim Empire. Wow. And decided to share some of their light, the knowledge, the wisdom that they have with the Khalifa over there, which was named Al-Hakim bi-Amrillah. And they brought groundbreaking new idea, which was given before only by Jesus, from Nazareth. When he came and he told the Sanhedrin, he told them, show me the coin, because they were asking a question. And he says, you see, what's picture is here? And they said, that's a picture of Caesar. So he told them, listen, don't mix politics and faith. Give to Caesar what to Caesar, give to God what to God. And that later on, that secret have brought the Western world as we know it to advance much more in comparison, let's say, to the Muslim Empire, because they were able to separate state from religion. And they stopped burning scientists, and they stopped burning women, calling them witch, and they started really advancing progress, and they kept the purity of religion in the hands of religious people, which can come and teach traditions, but they let, doctors become doctors and scientists become scientists and general be generals. And the Druze did the same thing basically with the Islam. They told them, listen, there's no such thing as we have to follow only this religion. There's a lot of people that come from different religions, and as long as they believe in the one God, and that's why the Druze, one of the nicknames they had through the history was Al-Muwahhidun. As a fact, the name Druze came as a bad nickname for them because there was a guy named Al-Darazi, which was an enemy of the Druze, and they got to be known because Al-Darazi was hunting them down. So they started calling the people of Al-Darazi the Druze, but the real kind of original name, one of them, was Bani Ma'ruf, was Al-Muwahhidun, meaning from the word Wahid, Wahad, Yahid. And it's the people who believe in one God. So they came and they said this: God probably might have sent different prophets, different messengers to different people all around the world to teach about the one God. And people can hear about it from Islam. People can hear about it through Judaism. People can hear about God through Christianity, through other religions, even through the Hindu and etc. and etc. And we accept all religions. They're all kind of part of the same puzzle that is showing humanity and our connection to our God. And we should be accepting and tolerant to all religions. And also, the Druze themselves, even till today, no one is asked to become religious. You're not forced to become religious. Actually, it's quite a hard way to become a religious person. Same like in Judaism. No one is asked to become a rabbi. They don't come and say, all of you need to be rabbis. So people can choose that path to go and start studying the Bible, learning the traditions, teaching, and etc. And with the Druze, most Druze people today are not religious. They keep traditions. They will go and they do the prayers when it's needed. They will eat the food. They will come with the family. But only the ones who choose to become religious will go through that, process to become religious people. We call them the mashayikh, the people of faith. And Islam in the beginning was fascinated by this idea for about 23 years. They were like, that's an interesting idea. But then they came and asked them a very serious question, which sealed their fate. They said, wait a second. You're saying that God can send a prophet or a messenger anytime to come and teach people about him. And the Jews said, yeah, of course, he's God. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to send tomorrow another prophet, another messenger, he will do that. If he wants to talk through someone, he will talk to someone. And the Muslims came and said, wait a second. So can another prophet come after Muhammad? Because he's the seal of the prophets. And the Jews said, yeah, if God chooses so, he can do that. And then they said, no, there's no other prophet that will come after Muhammad. Muhammad is the last prophet. Islam is the last final version of religion that need to dominate the earth. Hence, the Druze are considered kuffar, infidels. And they started hunting down and killing the Jews. So the Jews who basically, like I said, came to the spotlight and suddenly, brought themselves up and came with that offer of wisdom, found themselves being exterminated and being killed. And they had to run again and hide again. And they went and left Egypt. And that was the last time there was Jews in Egypt. And they ran back to the mountains of Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, where they settled in the mountains, where they could defend themselves and hide. And they became farmers who work the land and also fierce warriors and fighters to defend themselves, to defend their children, their women, etc. And for the last 1,000 years, the Jews have been almost, it's safe to say, living in kind of a dual identity. They would hide their faith, and sometimes they'll pretend to be part of your faith just to survive. So Jews today, even still in Jordan, don't really say that we are Druze. They say, yeah, we're Muslims. We're just like you. They go, they pray the prayers, they read the Quran. In Syria as well, for many, many years, until lately, basically, they were kind of trying to stay away from, yeah, we're Muslims just like you in order to survive. We've seen that with also Jewish people. I've met a very good friend of mine in Israel. She's from Holland, and she comes from a family, very proud Jewish Zionist family. The family name is Bueno de Muscat, which, asked, what does Bueno de Muscat mean? That's like an interesting name. And she said it means the good mosque, Bueno del Mosque, kind of like that. And I said, a Jewish family that have a name, the good mosque? And she said, yeah, well, we had to hide our identity under Islam, so we pretended to be Muslims. So several religions, the Jews are not the only ones that had to hide their identity. And until today, around the Middle East, they're either hiding their identity or they're suffering from persecution. In a matter of fact, the only place in the Middle East where Druze are proudly wearing their religion and the flag and, have complete freedom of religion is in Israel. That's the only place that we come and say, no, we're Druze, we're not Muslims. We have
and respected for it and loved for it.
Even for it, exactly.
It's an incredible thing, Mansour, because we just went through a couple hundred years of history in just a few minutes, and you are brilliant at giving them that over. And what we see is what has happened so often, that the Druze community started off being very proud of their faith because the Druze have so much to give, coming from this lineage of Jethro, directly connected to this very holy and important biblical figure. And as you were able to show love and respect for others, you were actually oppressed for that. That is actually this radical acceptance, which I believe is one of the most important values of godly people, that got the original Druze in Egypt murdered for their faith because they didn't accept Islam. And what happened then is that now across the Middle East still, Druze are scared to say that they're Druze. So they're keeping this hidden religion that's ancient and holy and sacred and that we should all be able to learn from and respect and live in brotherhood. And when we saw that they came out recently being a proud Druze community in Syria, we saw massacres taking place. Mm-hmm. So let's hear a little bit about what are the numbers? How many Druze are there in the Middle East? And how does the plight of the Druze in Israel, how does it differ from the Druze in Syria, and are there in Lebanon and Jordan? And what do you see as the message that the larger Western world, so many people watching this are joining from America or joining from Europe and Africa, where there aren't necessarily Druze communities. What message from the journey of the Druze community do you think is relevant today to what the West is facing?
Whew, wow. So you said it right. The Druze in Syria were hidden and were trying to keep low in order to survive. And the beginning of the massacres that we're seeing right now actually started because, and I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming Israel. Absolutely not. But what happened is, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, Israel was very generous and allowed the Druze from Syria to come and visit in Israel. And they opened the borders for them. They gave them buses, and many Druze went and waited for them there because that's our family. There were families that got separated, in 48 because some stayed in Syria and Lebanon, some in Israel, but we still kept talking to each other. We'd go with megaphones to the shouting mountain, we used to call it. We'd shout and we'd do a picnic. I remember myself as a little kid sitting with my grandfather, and we'd have a picnic, and then we'd just wait. There's no smartphones then. Wait, right. And then we see some Druze people coming in the mountain. We look in binoculars and say, that's my brother Amin, and we start, call him with a megaphone, Amin, marhaba Mansour. And my grandfather would lift me up and says, look at the grandchild I have on the other side. So we kept that connection. And when the Bashar al-Assad regime fell down, the Druze had the opportunity to come to Israel without being killed by the Syrian regime. And they came to visit one of the holiest places for the Druze, which is, they believe, the burial place of Sidna Nabi Shaib, which is considered the burial place of Jethro, actually, as per the Druze belief. So many of these mashayikh, I think 300 or 400 of them, came to Israel. And together we went and we had a feast and they celebrated. And when they went back to Syria, this made a lot of waves in the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. And I say it for a few reasons. For the first reason is because they've been selling the idea that Israel is an evil entity and that they oppress minorities and that they hate Islam and that they hate Christians, that they hate the Druze. And suddenly reality is coming out. The truth will set you free. Suddenly you see that the reality is that Israel doesn't hate minorities. Actually, they're welcoming minorities from an enemy country with open arms and letting them go with buses to go and pray and, enjoy the company of their relatives. So they started to try to paint it as if the Druze are traitors and that they work for Israel and that they're part of this evil Zionist entity. And the Druze in Syria was pushed with the back to the wall, said, no, we're not Israelis. We're just Druze. We have relatives in Israel. We don't hate the Israelis. We don't hate the Jews. They're our cousins, but we're not Israelis. We're just Syrians like you. And then they started doing blood labeling on them and basically trying to frame them as traitors, frame them as murderers. And they shared that fake audio recording, which was proven to be fake as far as I know. There was just a WhatsApp audio recording that someone pretended to be a Druze sheikh who went and insulted the Prophet Muhammad. They never really checked it. They never really tried to test it to see. And even if it was true, go and talk to the guy. But what they did is they used it as an excuse because they just finished slaughtering the Alawites and they killed more than 10,000 of them, in the most horrific way with knives and etc. Now, we're talking about murdering from house to house and burning families alive and sexual crimes and etc. And then they went and turned the light towards the Druze and says the Druze now are the next. They hate Muhammad. We should go and kill them. So they started doing the massacre of the Druze in Jaramana and other places, which we saw. And meanwhile, they started asking that the Druze will surrender all their weapons. Now, you need to understand, in Syria, Jawlani, who took over the country, the government, is an ISIS terrorist, and he was leading an Al-Qaeda ISIS cell in Syria called Al-Nusra, and he already sieged a Druze village before, about 3-4 years ago, where they killed all the men, kidnapped the women, and converted everyone else to Islam, forcefully conversion. So the Druze know who is this guy and told him, listen, sorry, but we demand proper democratic election because, you took this government by force. And we don't trust you because you're going to come and kill us if we give you your weapon. We saw what you did with the Alawites and the Christians. So he came and says, no, we are Syria. We can't allow you to have weapons. Give your weapons away. The Druze said, wait, you ask us to give the weapons, but meanwhile you're giving weapons to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, and to foreign fighters from Chechnya, from Iraq that are coming. You're giving them military-graded weapons sponsored by Turkey, by Qatar, but you want us to give away our weapons. That doesn't sound like a very good deal. So they decided then that they're going to come down and basically slaughter and kill all the Druze. And that's when Israel stepped in the picture and told Jawlani, hands off the Druze. We're not going to let you. And it incited this whole war between the Muslim kind of in the Middle East to the Druze where they want to go and annihilate them. And that's where we're talking and seeing right now. It basically brought October 7, 2.0 version on the Druze. Only difference is when October 7 happened to the Jews, Israel was here to defend them. The IDF was here to defend them. Many Druze fighters went and defended their Jewish brothers and sisters. So October 7 only lasted for about a day and a half or two of a massacre of civilians. In Syria, there was no one to defend the Druze except from Israel, and they did that with the Air Force. And the massacre lasted for about 14 days straight. Imagine October 7 going for 14 days straight. And up until now, more than 40 days of siege. People are still dying in that mountain because they don't have medicine. People who need insulin. There was a few people who died because they couldn't get their insulin. They have diabetes. I have my relative, my cousin there. He's a father. He's my age. He got shot in the leg. And all he needs is a screw to go and, put in the leg and fix the bone. And they can't get the medicine supply because there's a siege. And every time they send an ambulance out, these ambulances get executed. They stop the ambulance and they kill anyone in the ambulance. So they can't really even get medicine. So he might end up having to have his leg amputated. And in Syria, that's a death sentence. If you're a father, you have 3 kids, there's no social insurance, the government is not helping you. And if you cannot walk properly and defend your family properly, you'll become, a very, very miserable life. You become a beggar. You can't really do anything for your life. So that's just a glimpse of the situation that is happening right now in Syria. Sorry, I kind of...
Wow, Mansour, no, it's so important because it's something that at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, we've been following from day one. After the first massacre of Jews and of Christians and Druze in January, the fellowship went in and set up a medical clinic because of exactly what you're saying. There was no medical care. And we delivered over 1,500 food boxes to the Druze and Christian community in Syria. And after the massacre in Soweto, we were getting SOS calls from the local hospital where an entire priest's family was killed. All the Druze workers in the hospital were killed. And what they were saying was, we don't have antibiotics. We don't have basic medicine to save lives. We don't have anesthesia in order to put people under to give them surgery. And so the fellowship worked with the Israeli government to bring a masok, a helicopter in full of medical equipment, and be able to deliver it. That it's something that what I hear you saying is, we're in a position right now all around the world where people of faith who are proud of their faith, of humanity, are being persecuted and oppressed, whether you're Jews, whether you're Druze, or even Christians. When you look at what's happening in Europe, and definitely when you see what's happening in Africa, that there are massacres against Christians, that this seems like it's really a very clear fight of people who value life and cherish life and sanctify life versus those who are worshiping death, going house to house and massacring people with a knife. That what would be a message? Mansour, you are a hero. You grew up from a family of heroes. You've served in the Israeli army. You spend your time defending these Jewish, Christian, Druze values. There's something happening in the world right now. Isaiah, I think, said it best, where he said there's going to be a time where good is called bad and bad is called good, and the whole world's going to be confused. And you have a Middle East that's full of dictators, and Israel's the only democracy, yet all the problems are being blamed on Israel. You have a Middle East where Christians and Druze and Alawites and Coptics are being murdered, and Israel's the only place that actually all those religions can live in freedom, and yet Israel's the bad one. It's all being turned around, that truth is called lies and lies is called truth. As a Druze who have seen it firsthand, what would you say the message to the West is? And I want to also invite our followers, I see we have a lot of comments here, to write in any questions that you have for Mansour. We have to end soon. This is fascinating for me, and I hope to have you back on very soon. But for now, for all the people listening, feel free to write in any questions you have for Mansour, and we'll try to get to those as well.
Well, wow, I didn't even know we're live. Now I see all the comments. So hello, everyone. I've been jumping from one call to another. I sometimes, everything blurs. You mentioned Isaiah, and Isaiah is one of my favorite prophets in the Bible. I call him, he's like a prophet on steroids. He made so many prophecies, so many pearls of wisdom. I think it was Isaiah that said, was in Chizkiah and in the book of Isaiah, that said, God basically saying there, I will make Jerusalem a stumbling block for the nations of the world, and they will stumble upon it. And we're seeing it today. What happened is A lot of nations with their hate to Israel and to the Jews and to the Bible are stumbling blindly into anti-Semitism, into racism. And if you look at countries that become anti-Semit, they end up turning very dark, very fast. I think one of the best
Self-destruct.
self-destruct, absolutely. One of the best measuring points for a nation, if it's a good nation or a bad nation, is how they treat minorities, how they treat the innocent, how they treat the needy, how they treat the little ones. And you can see Israel treats minorities amazingly, equally. But then you can see a lot of these countries around us, they treat minority very bad. The best example is recently, I think about maybe a year ago, there was a group of 14 and 16 years old teenage Druze girls from Israel, from the village of Yarka, who went and sent a satellite to space with the help of SpaceX. So you have teenage Israeli girls with full scholarship from the government who are working in science, and they were able to send a satellite to space. Meanwhile, you have teenage girls, Yazidis, Christians, Druze in Syria and other Muslim countries that are being kidnapped and becoming sex slaves and sold for sex trafficking. So that gives you a very good example of what's happening in the Middle East. Now, you mentioned what the West is missing. What the West doesn't understand, people might not like to hear that, but I don't care. There is a war between civilizations, and Islam as a global, I'm not talking individuals here and there, as a global force, still sees himself as in a state of war with the West, with Christianity. They want to dominate the world. They want to convert the world to Islam, and they're not stopping anytime soon. The West forgot that. They don't even understand that they're in a war. So it's a bit of a problem when someone want to convert you and take you and destroy your way of life, but meanwhile you are don't even know that you're in the game. And we're seeing that happening in Europe, in the streets of Europe. We're seeing that happening as radical teachings that are happening around mosques around the world, in the US, all around the world, where they're teaching very radical stuff, but the West is just ignoring it. In the name of tolerance, in the name of political correctness, in the name of freedom, they're allowing people that don't believe in these values to take advantage of these values. And the West, I think, should wake up, the Christian world, the Jewish world, the Druze, and start understanding, who are my allies here? Who are the people that don't want to destroy me and don't want to change the way of my life? Americans are not waking up in the morning and thinking, we want to conquer Israel and make everybody Christians there. Danish people are not waking up in the morning saying, we're going to invade Holland and we're going to make them eat the same bread that we eat. I don't know what. They okay, that's beautiful that they have their way of life. We have our way of life. We can go and visit them and enjoy. Many Muslim countries until today, if they could, they would. If they could have conquered the world, if they can invade a country, they will do that and change the way of life. And if they can't, what they usually do is they send their own young males usually into that society, and they start demanding, their own rights. And slowly they grow, they bring children, and they start implementing Sharia law anywhere they go. And if the West doesn't wake up to see that, it's going to become very, very bad for them. Very, very bad. I think that's a very important warning for everybody. Wake up and see what is happening. If you care about your way of life, don't be selfish. You enjoyed a great life because your governments were great, your leaders were great, and many brave men and women made a lot of sacrifices throughout the history of your countries to defend your way of life. And now you're going to be remembered as a generation who destroyed that, who allowed that to slip under their hands, and we're going to fall under the hands of dictatorship, religious dictatorship, Sharia law. And I think that's a very important message for the West to understand.
What a warning. I think that it's so important to remember that the freedom that we have, the freedom to practice religion as we like, the freedom to dress as we want, the freedom to make decisions for our own children, our own daughters, our own education, is something that is in no way a given. And it's the most sacred value that we have to recognize is a gift, and something that if we don't protect, that historically we've learned that we will lose. So Mansour, Ashkar, you are a beacon of wisdom. Your unique perspective and life experience is something we've all learned from. And what I heard in your final warning is scary, and it's dark, and it's a wake-up call. But I also hear something that's so beautiful, which for me is that candle in the darkness, which is, we need to stick together, us people of faith who sanctify life, who recognize that life is beautiful, that life is a gift, that life is a godly value that we all stand by, to realize that it's through that breath of God that we are here today, that he continues to breathe it in us. And with every breath we have, if we stand unified with one another, if we stand loving one another, if we stand protecting these values that we hold dear, I believe the light always outweighs the darkness, and the good will always outlive the bad.
Amen. May I add one more thing, actually?
Please.
One more thing. So it's a word of thanks to anyone who is watching right now and who stood beside the Druze, beside of Israel. When the massacre of the Druze started in Syria, one of the government, executives of Syria was to cut the internet over the mountain of Sweda, and they did that, and to cut their electricity, keep them off the grid. And then they send their soldiers with ISIS and Al-Qaeda to go and kill everyone and take their phones and delete all the images. And they even gave instructions to not allow any recording, because we don't want to do the same mistake that they did with the Christians, the Alawite or Hamas did in Israel, where they live streamed their crimes. For the first 4 days of the war in that mountain, they had no internet, no electricity. They were in the dark. We knew more about what's happening to them than they did, because the jihadists were recording. Somehow, miraculously, by organizations like yours and others who woke up and said, we're not going to wait for governments to come and step in, we're going to go and step in ourselves, by civilians, several Starlink devices were able to be smuggled into that mountain. And that brought internet to the people in Sweda. That brought them the ability to start sharing with the world and telling them, look what is happening to us. They're trying to eradicate us. That even gave the strength to the fighters, because they're all, simple people, farmers, agriculture or bankers. Well, not a lot of banks there, but what I'm talking about, simple people. They were able to start communicating through WhatsApp, because suddenly they have internet, and they would hear, okay, this neighborhood has been overrun. Send your men to come and rescue. So they send the guys to fight there. This family was just slaughtered and they kidnapped their daughter. So the man would hear that WhatsApp message and they will go outside and fight, and many times even die in the way, and start rescuing their daughters and the children. So that was just an example of how, in times of darkness, it's super important that we give the people that are suffering and being oppressed the way to have a candle of light, to have something to show the world, to have a voice. And all of that happened thanks to people. And I'm sure people here that are watching it and back home, anyone who helped, who spoke, who shared a video, who shared a post, who donated money to different causes that were helping these people of need, like your organizations and others, you did more than many, many governments around the world. You literally helped save a minority that we have 1 million of us on planet Earth. There's about 1 million Druze, and more than half of them are in Syria. So we are a minority among minorities even. And if it wasn't for the people who cared and said, I'm not going to let the news tell me what's happening because they're lying. I'm going to go and I'm going to check myself. So I want to just really thank you, anyone, take this opportunity, anyone that stood with the Druze, with us, thank you so much, because thanks to you, the Druze are still alive. The Druze and the Christians in that mountain are still alive.
Amen. I lay before you life and death. Choose life. And I think that's the message we can all internalize from this. Mansour, Ashkar, keep on doing your holy work. We stand with you. We stand with the Druze community, with all the persecuted communities across the Middle East, the Christian community. We're praying for them right now as they're being massacred across Africa and the Middle East. And we stand together in this pursuit of freedom and life. And I believe we will see success, because God blesses those who are good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching. If you found this interesting, enlightening, if you thought this was inspiring, share it, share it, share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your communities. It is a wake-up call for all of us. And I think Mansour covered so many different aspects, from spiritual to historic to what's happening today, that are relevant for all of us in our journey of faith, in our journey of nationhood, in our journey of identity and understanding the Middle East. Because if you don't understand what's happening in the Middle East, you can't understand what's happening in the West. So thank you for joining. Share this video, and God bless you all. Shalom.